Hi, it's Paul Banis, the GreatDad.com, and thank you very much for joining either the podcast or the YouTube version of the podcast. I'd really appreciate it if you took just a second to subscribe either on your podcast app or in YouTube. It doesn't really do anything. It's not going to send you any emails. It's just going to show up more often on your feed, and it does me a lot of good in terms of getting more exposure for this work I do to support dads. I'd also like to invite you to come to my page, GreatDad.com/go, if you'd like to discuss more about any of the issues that we are covering within the podcast, especially if there's any way I can help you to be a sounding board in your own struggles to be a dad and to be there for your family. So take a look at that. It also includes a link to my course on gratitude, where at GreatDad.com/gratitude with a offer to take that course for free. So see you in a second. Hey, it's Paul Banis with GreatDad.com, and I'm here doing my weekly series talking to fathers and hopefully getting a little bit of insight and perspective and maybe some good advice for young fathers and even fathers of older kids. So today I've got Dale Kershner with me to talk about this. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah. Well, Dale, you've got this wealth of coaching experience. You've been coaching for 43 years. I mean, it feels like we're about the same vintage, but you've been doing coaching since before coaching really was established as even a concept.
Yeah, they didn't call it coaching when I started doing what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And you do coaching with parents and couples relating to family and specifically on kids.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So, is there anything that you've seen that has been a constant? I mean, the world has changed so dramatically, especially in the role of fathers in the
Yeah.
last 43 years. Are there any enduring principles that have not changed in time about what works in parenting that we can say are, at least from your perspective, are definitive?
Yeah, I think so. Um, I think something that we were doing 43 years ago and that I'm still doing today is treating smaller humans like bigger humans.
Hmm.
Um, uh, the not even baby talk when they're babies.
Right.
Treating them with respect, trust, dignity, the same way you would communicate with any other person of your same vintage. Um, I think that's been a real important one that has brought children along, maybe as effectively as anything else that I've had parents do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that uh, certainly a lot of people, Dr. Spock would have agreed with you 43 years ago, but
Exactly.
not everybody practiced that 43
No,
years ago. There was a
no,
lot
they
of
did not. Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I remember getting a question from a parent one time that, my son came to me and he asked me, Dad, what's a blowjob?
Oh,
Right.
yep.
And I said, and what did you respond? He said, I didn't know what to respond. I don't know how to handle that. And I said, well, my theory has always been if he's old enough to ask, he's old enough to get the answer.
Yeah. The answer that's appropriate to that age, obviously.
Totally, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Which
You
would,
may not want to show him internet porn
yeah,
describing
yeah,
the,
yeah,
yeah,
a very different answer for a 5-year-old versus a
very,
16.
yes.
Okay, so I guess on the flip side, what have you seen that has changed in your clients in terms of what are there new things that really dominate in terms of parenting? I mean, hopefully beyond the obvious like internet and porn and
Yeah.
drugs and everything, but is there something else that you've seen in terms of this dynamic?
Yes. I think children are more intelligent today than they
Mm,
were back then.
yeah.
Certainly better informed, right?
Mhm.
Intelligence may be a kind of a loose concept, but um, you know, we when we were young, we couldn't type into a thing that we carry in our pocket and find out, what the temperature of the surface of Jupiter is. We couldn't
Yeah.
know that. It was a trip to the library. It was getting the World Book out and then two or three different sources before we found anything. So kids come to the conversation knowing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the obligation on parents, specifically on fathers, is to know enough to stay ahead of their curve.
Mm-hmm.
And, that involves a certain level of active involvement where, you're seeking out this information. Your child has an interest in astrophysics. And so to some degree, you're obligated to at least become conversant in astrophysics.
Right. Right.
You want to encourage and stimulate them to move, to whatever level they're capable of getting to, and it's on you to at least stay slightly behind them to keep
Yeah,
pushing.
I find that's really inspiring. I think in the real world, it's hard for parents always to do that. And I guess I'd like to give the listeners a little bit of an out that if you're not perfect at that every day, that's very human. But the idea of knowing that you can't just take a child and say, set it and forget it kind of thing. You have to be constantly listening and into their world so that what you have to say, like you say, is relevant today versus what they would have said a year ago. And that is hard. It's very, very hard.
It is hard. And if anything, I think that's another shift that I've seen. Um, Dads experiencing their successes or failures through their sons
Mm-hmm.
has changed substantially.
Mm.
And I think is another obligation for fathers is to, um, you know, your passion for baseball is not necessarily the same passion your son
Yeah.
or daughter has.
Yeah.
And it's important to discover that rather than assume something. And, I can't tell you the number of parents who, well, and I think we've all seen it, are passionately compulsive about, oh no, you shall do this,
Right.
right? Or
Because
you
I
shall
did it.
become
Yeah.
proficient at
Right.
this, right?
Right.
Yeah, you got to make the NBA because I never could. So, right.
Yeah. I had the potential, but you've got the opportunity.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Exactly. Yeah, because I can tell you everything you need to know to do it now.
Yeah. Would you see that a lot, that idea, like that children, especially among men, I would assume this is very common because I've experienced myself, is you
Sure.
want to create these like mini me kind of copies of yourself because you know from life experiences this is the age old problem is that we have the experience, they have the youth, and in a lot of cases, it's very, very difficult to transfer that information, even if you're not trying to push them into exactly what you're doing. But we know things that work out in general that are probably timeless, and they don't necessarily believe it or want to know it.
Right. I think that points to another couple of things. First of all, I see it a lot. I think it's human to want to, well, first of all, you want them to succeed. You knew what you wanted to succeed in, so how easy is it to say, well, I'll get them to, whether they want to or not. Now, the pushback is much more powerful these days from the children.
Mm,
I think a sense of independence, might call it entitlement, but their sense of individuality is much more powerful today than it was back then. So them resisting that and not allowing that occurs. I also see parents being much better about, okay, what do you want for you? And let's go see what we can do about that.
right.
But it also means that dads who want a major leaguer for a son, who finds out the son wants to be an astrophysicist, either, and children won't hear what parents say. This is
Yeah.
standard for all children. So you may have to find someone who knows something about astrophysics to marry up to your child so that that resource is available to them in a way that they'll actually listen to it.
Right.
And that certainly takes a ton of effort, commitment, all of those things.
So Well, there you draw a distinction between somebody who wants to do like excel in sports versus somebody who wants to excel in science. Sometimes it's I just don't want to do that, and
Yep.
what fills that spot. And I think this is a huge challenge that I wish maybe I'd understood this better as a younger dad. Is that
Yeah.
because I understood and I want to ask a question about happiness after this, but I understood that part, but I never really understood about how you get them, expose them to possibilities for passion. We did that, but I
Yep.
think the opportunity for dads and parents is to more actively find those passions and uh, how you can get more of them into their lives and expose them to more things. Because I think any responsible parent is trying to, get them to play the piano or get them to go out for a
Of
baseball
course.
or, all these things. But you don't know what the magic thing is. And if you've got a child who is searching and it seems to be unhappy and hasn't yet found that,
Yep.
have you seen any ways to get to that answer quicker?
Sure. Um, it comes from work that I've done with fully grown or semi-fully grown
Uh-huh.
adults. Um, so many people have come and one of the things they're seeking from working with me is why am I here? Right? What is my
Yeah.
purpose
Yeah.
on this planet and so
Bigger.
forth?
Yeah. Recently, that's just, that's entered the
Everyone,
zeitgeist where everybody's
right?
asking.
Yes. So a few years back, a couple decades back, I had to define, okay, how do I provide this to people? And the same thing, of course, occurred with children in a slightly different way. So there is an amount of digging available, but it lives in the world of stuff we don't necessarily know we don't know.
Hmm.
So a child, okay, we're trying the piano. Okay, we're trying baseball. Okay, then we're trying astrophysics. Okay, then we're trying whatever it is. And we think, okay, throw everything at them. One of them will stick, and then the child will go in that direction.
Right.
Kind of a standard operating
Yeah.
procedure. If we sit down for a moment, and even we tried piano, okay, and we start there, and then we sit down and go, okay, are you passionate about piano? Which is a simple question. Yes or no. I'm passionate or not passionate, or somewhere in between. And then the question is, okay, what about playing the piano are you passionate about or not passionate about? Okay, great. And then what about that? The fact that music is in my soul. Okay, great. What about music being in your soul drives you or motivates you or inspires you? And there's a level of digging down to everything that's underneath the surface activity that I think gives some clues to, okay, I'm a scientific thinker, I'm a musical thinker, I'm a artistic thinker, whatever. And then you can try the shotgun approach again, but at least it's a focused field.
Hmm.
And then they'll try stuff. And of course, they're kids. So 10 minutes on this, 5 minutes on this. It's going to keep looking like that. But every once in a while, 5 minutes turns into 25 minutes. And then it's time to pay attention.
Well, piano is an interesting example because I think a lot of parents, in my case, I didn't learn to play the piano, but I wanted my kids to play the piano,
Hmm.
or people have played the piano and it gave them incredible joy and
Yep.
social acceptance and everything, and they want
Yep.
their kids to do it. But they are there skills like that we should force our kids to at least learn at a rudimentary level, even if it's not their passion, because
Uh,
it's such like the multiplication tables. I mean, that doesn't give
sure.
anybody joy, but it's a basic skill, a basic life skill. And I would argue maybe understanding or having some appreciation for music also is like all those things that we do, going to
Yep.
museums and things like that, they may not excite you as a 12-year-old, but they add later on the fabric of life and how things are connected
Yep.
and so much more depth to your experience.
Yep.
So do you have a philosophy about that?
I do. Uh, I was trained in piano
Uh-huh.
and did so for 12 years. And the thing that made me stop was when my parents told me I had to do it.
Hmm.
I had 12 years invested. They had some picture of what that was going to turn into. Mine was a different picture. And, at 12 years, when I was like 14, 15 or whatever, um, they, uh, they said, no, 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 you've done it this far. You have to keep doing it.
Oh, yeah.
And in that moment, I determined for myself that I was never interested in piano again,
Uh-huh.
which I regret now
Uh-huh.
because I would love to
Right.
be able to just pick it back up and
Right.
do, which I
Well,
kind of
this is the problem
can't,
is they often come back to you later on and say, why didn't you teach me French? Why didn't you,
right?
force me to do?
Right. So I agree with exposing them, taking them to the museums, letting them talk to the astrophysicist and so forth. The only thing I think, you're talking about that is basic. They're going to learn multiplication. They're going to do that at school. Maybe not a great job anymore, but still. Um, and they're going to learn how to read. They're going to learn how to write. What I don't think children are taught, and I think it's the thing that's maybe in my mind the most critical thing for them to learn, is how to learn,
Hmm.
right? The structures of connecting disparate pieces of information and coming to a conclusion. I don't know anywhere that children are actually taught, okay, here's what you do with the information that comes at you in the world. And of course, nowadays, holy crap, the information that's coming at
Yeah.
you. So take this. Now, is that sufficient? Well, no, maybe you need three more examples of this and then bring that all together. And then can you draw from within yourself a conclusion about those pieces of information that you got? So yeah, I think that would be the thing that I would teach every child that came my way is how do you learn and how do you do so most effectively?
Yeah. Well, I think I'm following you, though I don't know. I guess to your point that you don't see that really in schools. You hear a lot about critical thinking, but it's
Right,
the idea of bringing like math and music together, for example, and seeing how
right.
they interconnect. You don't see a lot of that. Are there interdisciplinary courses like that in high school? I don't know of many.
I don't know of that. The only way I ever ran into it was after I was in the university.
Hmm.
That's where I started to meet people who had those
Right.
conversations. I even met a professor who held a preschool on his own time, and he was teaching the 4 and 5 year olds Greek and Latin. And, the concept being that at that age, they're sponges, they'll learn anything you
Right.
give them. And he started training them in, okay, how do you come to conclusions from bits of information? And I just thought it was inspiring.
Well, that's an interesting one too, because if you learn Greek and or Latin, which are dead languages,
Yes.
you have the potential of marrying that up with etymology of today and understanding
Yep.
far more vocabulary than you ever could. Maybe there's you rarely hear of Latin being sold to kids that way, where
No,
it
right.
actually is.
But I think it points to something that's equally valuable and is on the same vein. So if you have a child who's doing well in math, great, and you'll encourage that and you'll get them in AP math and all that kind of, if they do AP math anymore, they call it something else now, I'm sure. But but you'll encourage all that. But is the conversation being had that math is the basis for programming and binary and astrophysics and physics without the astro and everything that you're going to come into in the world, like, okay, you want to be an astronaut, well, let's start with math.
Yeah. Well, you want to be a business owner. You want to be an entrepreneur. I mean, yeah. But
Right,
that is a challenge to getting the kids to understand why math, especially
right,
math beyond a basic level.
yeah,
What about the fact that there's this big complaint now and kind of backlash that kids are overscheduled. They're doing too many activities, and I think that is a contradiction because how else are they going to be exposed to all these things unless they do get a chance to experience a thing at summer camp or an after school
sure,
activity that gives them something new, and whether they like it or not, or whether they continue or not, at least they tried chess camp or whatever it was.
right. um I revert to quality over quantity.
Hmm.
I think that
Well, that's it. That's an interesting distinction in itself.
yeah, like sure expose them, but have done the work with them to know that this is the thing to be exposed to.
Hmm.
Like, okay, they have an interest in this, great. Then I'm going to find 3 examples of this and I'm going to expose them to that. And and I know that we need to expose them to things they're not interested in
Right.
for breadth of learning. But I'd rather do the extra work as a parent to find the right chess camp, or a chess camp that also talks about the mathematics behind chess movements and how to extrapolate the ending move from the beginning move, or something
Hmm.
more like that, more substance.
Yeah.
So I think that's the obligation we have, is maybe not the obligation, but it's the invitation we have as parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, another big challenge is finding good teachers that not only teach the subject, but teach the value of the subject at the same time. How about the this dichotomy now between, I think this is a huge issue for dads of our, well, maybe who were coming up 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean,
Gotcha.
my experience with my kids is this dichotomy between success and happiness. Our generation was told, we all made mistakes. A lot of us hated our lives, our careers, and most important thing for us was to tell our kids to find their passion. We didn't care whether they were
Right,
billionaires or not, but we just
right,
wanted them to be happy. And then we've turned out a lot of kids, and I don't know if this is related to that decision or not, but we've turned out a lot of kids now who followed their passion but can't find a job, and they're working at a coffee store.
right.
So, have you seen that a lot with your clients?
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
Right? And I think it's related.
yeah.
I think the participation ribbon did more
Hmm.
damage than it did good.
Sure.
Um, and I think that kids nowadays have more access to success.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but I think the thing that may be missing is the definitions. Success doesn't mean, or doesn't have to mean, stacks of money.
Hmm.
Doesn't have to mean the Lambo and the boat. It can, if
Yeah.
that's the thing that defines it for that person or that child. Um, but I also see plenty of them chasing Lambos and miserable about
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah. Still.
So I think it's the conversation about their internal purpose or passion or whatever it is, and it isn't enough to be passionate about what you're going to do. There's also a pragmatic aspect to it. Like,
Hmm.
okay, that's your passion, but great. How do we monetize your passion? Because you may actually have to pay the mortgage at some point. So great, be passionate, love what you do, as I always direct them to, but figure out a way to monetize.
But that seems to be missing in this conversation with kids now. The ones that go in and they do some major at colleges that never would have existed before, and doesn't really have an outcome that's other than critical thinking. I think there are a lot of
Yep,
majors that are great for developing critical thinking
sure.
and communication skills, but they're not a path specifically to anything. And kids kind of go through college with I don't know if it's a fantasy or just they're just
Yeah.
finishing the degree and hoping for the best.
Yep. I did.
Yeah, but it was a different time. I was a French
It
major,
was.
so I mean, I had no
Right.
idea, but I did have a plan what I was going to do after that. I was going to go to business school and I wanted to get in international work.
Right.
And then maybe that is the thing is starting earlier with a conversation of how you're going to survive. When would that even come up? When is giving them that harsh reality of
Yes.
someday I'm not going to be paying for all your
Right.
stuff.
Right. Especially when they see their friends, who have older brothers and sisters in their 30s who are staying at home with mom and dad.
Yeah,
Right.
there's still a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I went to college knowing that I had to have a degree.
Uh-huh.
Back when we did that, you had to have a degree. There was nothing available to you if you didn't at least have that basic for
Well,
40.
we were told in high school if that was exponentially more important
Yeah,
economically. There were
like whatever high school, but yeah, this.
but more kids
And
go to school than ever before. I think in our era it was under 20%, and now it's 35,
right,
40% who've done some degree of
right,
college. Yeah.
right. And I think that it's easier now to follow that path.
Hmm.
To some degree, I think that that path can be unconscious. It's just like, oh, this is what is done, so let's go do this. Um, I have questions about the value, right? The undirected value of a young person going into college, I think, is minimal.
Hmm.
They may learn a specific thing. They want to become a biologist, great. They'll take biology. They want to become whatever, they'll take a thing that leads them to the whatever. But I think, again, invitation to parent, not an obligation, is to let them know that just having a college degree is not enough.
Yeah.
That there are plenty of avenues for them to learn entrepreneurship or engineering or whatever it is, both within and outside of higher learning.
Hmm.
Um, it's funny what you mentioned, because I got my degree in communication and ended up doing international work.
Hmm.
Had no idea that's a direction I was going to head, but that's just the way the world went.
Hmm.
The opportunities presented themselves that way. So I think providing them the opportunity to be comfortable with um, with not knowing, to be excited about the possibility of everything's possible, more than this thing is where I'm headed. I think they can learn to embrace all of it, and then choose from a very healthy place their pathway in that everything.
Hmm.
I might be
Well, this
wrong.
well, this conversation may be a little bit anachronistic because uh, kids now know, are hyper aware that they're not necessarily going to get a job really fast, and
Right, right,
if they majored in something that isn't really a path to something,
right.
they know it's risky, and
Yeah,
they're scared to death that
right,
it's not going to work out. But it is an interesting time to be a parent in that regard, because you've already invested, or they've already invested the time, and you've invested the money to get them
right.
to a certain place, but it's not then leading somewhere, and now it's too late to go back and re
Redo all that. Yep.
yeah, yeah. But I think that is a really important discussion to have earlier, even if it is an uncomfortable one,
Hmm.
because it's not, they don't want to think about a day
No.
that comes when they are no longer living in the house
Nope.
and they have to fend for themselves. It's just
Yep.
not in their the makeup of their age. They want to rebel, yet they
Yeah.
want security at the same time.
Right.
And how do you get that message to them without them feeling sad or lost
Right.
or
Right.
rejected or
I think, at least something that I've done with clients in my history, is involving them in that knowledge set from 5, 6 years old.
mm,
Like, everybody takes the change out and, okay, add up, and this makes 85 cents. Okay, great. Yeah. But when you sit down with the stack of bills at the kitchen table, and you're going through, okay, it's 3,500 bucks for the mortgage, it's whatever, um, and letting them from the very early age understand the concept of, okay, mom and dad get paid this amount of money. And if they're typical mom and dads, the amount of money they pay in bills is more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that is a consideration. It doesn't guide what your passion is. It doesn't guide the direction you want to go, but understand, unless you're going to live in the back country in Botswana, um, you're going to have to pay things to have the things that are basic structures.
Right.
Um, and
Well, I
so,
guess in that case, you're kind of giving them the message of um, what is what happens in families without saying one day you're going to have your own, not not be living with us.
right,
It's like our son had about four or something. We were just talking about college, just in a general way about something about college life or whatever. And
yep.
he suddenly started crying. He said, "I don't want to leave you guys." Because for him that was really for him all I could see was leaving the house and us no longer
Right.
being mom and dad and being there for him. It was really a poignant moment, and we didn't bring that up again for for a while. We had to explain
But
to him the concept.
what a clue to getting at his motivations, getting at where he was coming from, and giving you an opportunity to clue into something there and pursue it. Like, okay, great. So I get that you love us and you want to always be with us and stuff. And you know, you may one day have children who feel the same way.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're going to have this conversation with them at that time. You
That might
know,
be a little bit beyond their pay grade at 20, at 5 or 6, but
I get that, but and you ease it in when they're ready.
yeah. Well, I hope my son who will come back for the holidays in a few weeks will express that same concern about never not
Exactly,
spending enough time with mom and dad
exactly.
into
Yeah, it is
adulthood.
now flipped around, I'm sure.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So I guess kind of wrapping up here, what are the things that your clients are talking to you most? I mean, aside from what are the biggest trends, but are there things that are coming up a lot right now?
Um, the most common one, of course, is tech.
Yeah.
How do I get my kid to take his face out of his phone?
Oh, yeah. Versus how do I then get him to understand the technology without spending all his time on
Right,
Instagram or whatever? Yeah.
right. Yeah. Gaming versus having an actual life. Those are some of the most common themes I'm
Wow.
seeing. Um, and I think we cycle them back to a passion of some sort.
Yeah.
If gaming's really a passion, great. There's something underneath that. And it may be avoidance of life, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. Then we go down that road and figure out how to manage that. Um, but oftentimes it's also, an interest in technology. Great. Well, we can expand on that. Plenty of opportunity there. Um, but mostly, I think the one piece that I find I spend most time with most parents is how to keep the connection. You're talking about your son who didn't want to leave. How do they keep that kind of loving connection between
Hmm.
themselves and their offspring?
Yeah.
The tweens and the teens, disappearing off the face of the planet as far as a conversation with mom and dad or actually saying anything meaningful or whatever, which of course starts when they're 4,
Yeah.
and then if you keep that channel open and you're diligent and committed and you put the extra effort into keeping that channel open, it'll stay open or at least can be reaccomplished.
Yeah, well, if anything, I think that's probably the most important thing that we've said today is about is this change that a lot of people take for granted in the first 10, 12 years that it's always going to be like this and they're always going to be pulling on your pant leg and wanting to stay with you. And
Yeah,
what you're saying is really it starts a lot earlier developing that relationship. And while it can be done at some level, repairing a
yeah,
relationship at 16,
yep.
it's far more effective to develop that depth of understanding and relationship starting very, very early.
And exponentially more difficult try to grasp it back once they've gotten to 15, 16.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yep. Okay. Well, it's been great having this conversation. I mean, it sounds like we're on the same wavelength on a lot of things.
It does.
I haven't been
Yeah.
coaching for as long as you have, but there's many of the same things come up with my clients too, especially how to manage their own work-life balance and still play this role that is increasingly being expected of dads. Back generation or two, a lot of dads were absent and nobody judged them about that.
Right.
And their
Nope.
kids didn't judge them later for having been relatively absent. But
Right.
now, if your parents aren't, if the mom or the dad isn't present in their lives, there's pain at the end of that story.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So people can find you at DaleKershner.com. You've got there's a website there to get in contact with you. You offer quite often we talk to coaches who have a complimentary discovery session, and I always say take advantage of this
Why
from
not?
this podcast or another. It's free coaching, and if you've never done coaching before, there's always something that you'll learn and have an action item at the end of a session, and it's definitely worth your time. And then you have, and I'll put your DaleKershner.com, make sure the spelling is correct in the show notes so people can find you. And then you've got a book coming out. It's Technology of Creating Joy, but it starts with practical
Happiness, the technology of creating joy.
Yeah, yeah.
Which seems kind of timely right now.
Yeah, very good. Okay, Dale. Well, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay. Paul Baines with GreatDad.com. You can find my coaching at GreatDad.com/go. Okay. Until next time, be strong.